I was catching up with a friend recently, and he's one of those, high performers who is just obsessed with optimizing his life.
Oh, I think we all know someone like that. The biomonitors, the calorie tracking.
Exactly that. He runs his day-to-day life like a Fortune 500 company, and at one point he pulls out his phone to show me his life dashboard.
The life dashboard, of course.
And I have to admit, it was undeniably impressive. A sea of green bars, 98% sleep efficiency, maximized productivity blocks, perfect nutritional adherence. He was looking at this screen with this, religious reverence.
As if the data was the reality itself.
Yes, pointing to it as this irrefutable proof that he was thriving. But the guy sitting across from me, the actual human, told a completely different story. He looked gray, visibly anxious, his leg was bouncing under the table, and he just seemed completely disconnected from our conversation.
He wasn't present.
Not at all. So I gently asked him, how do you actually feel? Ignoring the numbers. And he didn't even pause to check in with himself. He just glanced back down at his phone, frowned at the perfect score, and said, well, the algorithm says I'm peak, so I probably just need more water.
Wow.
That moment, where he trusted a digital abstraction more than his own exhausted reality. It was jarring. It wasn't just a quirk. It felt like a symptom of a much deeper fracture.
He let the metric displace the experience.
He completely let the metric displace the experience. He was suffering from this very specific modern delusion, the belief that the map is more real than the territory.
And it turns out this isn't just, a bad habit.
No. It's the result of a silent coup that has taken place inside the human brain where the emissary has stolen the throne from the master.
That phenomenon right there. That moment when the spreadsheet overrides your own senses, your intuition.
Yeah.
That is exactly what we're diving into today.
This whole deep dive is about understanding the profound intellectual and, I guess, cultural implications of this systemic imbalance in how we perceive the world.
And we're not just talking pop psychology here.
No, absolutely not. We are going straight to the source material, exploring the immense body of work from the distinguished neuroscientist, Dr. Ian McGilchrist.
Right. His framework really explains why modern life can often feel so fragmented, so shallow, and frankly, ruled by bureaucracy.
He provides the diagnosis for this widespread cultural malaise.
He does. And we're going to explore the implications of this hemispheric imbalance on our whole society. We'll be looking at its effects across huge systems from education and business right to the front lines of healthcare.
So our mission really is to understand how this neurological preference for abstraction, for quantification, that map has so profoundly eroded our connection to reality, the territory.
The living, breathing world.
And before we get any deeper, we have to be absolutely crystal clear on the core concept. When we talk about brain hemispheres, we are not falling into that old myth.
Right, the creative right brain, logical left brain thing?
Exactly. McGilchrist is very specific that the difference is not about what they do, but how they do it. It's about how they attend to the world. Is that a fair summary?
That's a perfect summary. It's all about the quality of attention given to reality. One side, the master, that's the right hemisphere, approaches the world holistically, contextually, openly. The other side,
the emissary,
the left hemisphere, approaches the world narrowly. It fragments it into pieces for specific utilitarian control.
Okay, let's unpack that. That distinction is everything. Let's start with the true ruler, the master. What defines the master's perception of the world?
The master, which is the right hemisphere, is really the foundation of our intuitive wisdom, our holistic perception. If you had to pick one word for its function, it would be vigilance.
Vigilance.
It's constantly awake to the entire world and all the relationships within it. It sees the whole picture all at once. It understands context above everything else.
So this is the part of us that picks up on a friend's subtle shift in mood or the unspoken tension in a room.
Exactly. All that complex nonverbal communication that really defines human interaction. That's the master at work.
So the master is dealing in the territory, the actual messy, complex, living world.
The flowing river, not the static photograph of the river.
Right. And its range of attention sounds, well, staggering. It seems like it's responsible for almost every essential type of attention we need for survival and connection.
It is. It's responsible for sustained attention, alertness, divided attention, global attention. Basically everything except for that very narrow, focused, detail-oriented attention you need for, say, a routine task.
And that narrow focus that belongs to the emissary?
Predominantly, yes.
Yeah.
The master favors the broad, flexible, global perspective.
And within that broad attention, you mentioned the concept of depth is crucial. How does McGilchrist define depth in this context? It's not just about knowing a lot about one thing, is it?
No, not at all. Depth is vital.
Yeah.
It's this sense of something lying beyond the immediate explicit data.
Something more.
Oh, something more. This sense of depth is essential because it's what informs context. If you lack depth, you only see the surface, a two-dimensional schematic of reality.
Like my friend's life dashboard, all surface, no depth.
Precisely. Depth is what brings us into a felt relationship with the world. It allows us to appreciate its complexity, to acknowledge that not everything can be boiled down to explicit language, and to recognize the profound, sometimes unexplainable parts of just being alive. The master deals with what is in all its messy, living detail.
Okay, so now let's turn to the other character in this drama, the emissary, the left hemisphere. It sounds less like a ruler and more like an indispensable but highly specialized tool.
That is exactly its role. A crucial technical tool, but it's fundamentally a subordinate. The emissary's main job is to manipulate the world to our advantage.
And to do that.
To do that, it takes the seamless, constantly flowing reality that the master captures, and it cuts it up. It slices it into manageable, discrete parts.
It turns the world into data points.
Yes, and then it represents these parts to us as abstractions, categories, representations. It deals in maps.
And these maps are the representations we live by. The spreadsheets, the algorithms, the checklists, language itself even.
Right. All highly efficient, but they're also fixed, certain, and ultimately lifeless.
They have to be useful for manipulation.
Correct. The emissary prioritizes the explicit, the known, the abstract, because those are things it can control and repeat. It prefers certainty. Think of a word. The right hemisphere, the master, understands the context, the tone, the implication of that word in a conversation.
But the left hemisphere...
The emissary just extracts the dictionary definition, the fixed category.
And this is where the danger comes in. The emissary is an incredibly effective servant, but it's a terrible, terrible master. So what happens when this limited tool starts to run the whole show?
The problem isn't the emissary's capability, it's arrogance and its fundamental limitation. Because it only deals with its own simplified model, the map it quickly mistakes that model for all of reality.
It's like looking at that photo of the river and believing, everything about the river's current, its depth, its temperature.
Exactly. It becomes prone to wildly overestimating its capabilities. It sees its own clean, fragmented, categorized world and assumes it has solved reality.
And what's really crucial here is that the emissary is structurally unaware of the vital information it's emitting.
It literally doesn't know what it doesn't know. Because the context, the depth, the feeling, the relationships, all of that is supplied by the master, whom it is now pushed aside. And this leads directly to the coup.
Which is defined by this massive proliferation of mechanistic thinking in our world. We start applying the tools of fragmentation and calculation, which are, effective for controlling inanimate objects to living systems.
To a human being, a relationship, a business, and ecosystem.
Right.
Yes. The consequence of emissary dominance is the reduction of all that complexity to measurable components. We begin reducing human beings to their neurological functions, or their economic utility, or their standardized test scores.
The map has displaced the terrain,
leading to the tyranny of the scoreboard in nearly every aspect of modern life. We are replacing the living, breathing organism with a simplified schematic. And then we're wondering why the organism is sick.
In this drive for quantification, for standardization, it has immediate, observable, and frankly perverse consequences when you translate it into institutional policy.
Oh, absolutely.
This is where the sheer mechanics of the emissary's logic bring us straight into the realm of something called Goodhart's law.
Goodhart's law is the inevitable failure mechanism of the emissary when it's put in charge. It's a beautiful, elegant summary of how this all goes wrong.
What's the official definition?
It states, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure.
It's so simple but so profound. The act of fixation corrupts the thing being measured.
It does. And it's critical to remember this isn't just about sloppy governance. This is a deep psychological and structural response to pressure.
Yeah, there was a sociologist, Donald T. Campbell, who had a parallel idea years earlier, which really drives this home.
What was his take?
He said, the more any quantitative social indicator is used for social decision-making, the more subject it will be to corruption pressures, and the more apt it will be to distort the very social processes it is intended to monitor.
That distortion is a direct result of the left hemisphere's focus on the fragment. If you set a goal, a score, a metric, a number, the entire system is incentivized to ignore the messy reality and just focus on hitting that one bullseye.
And your behavior changes in ways that make the measure useless for its original holistic purpose. We see this so vividly in high-stakes fields like graduate medical education or GME.
A perfect and worrying example.
Let's take the classic case. The USMLE Step 1 scores. These are meant to be quantitative measures of basic medical knowledge, right? They were designed as just one part of a holistic assessment.
One part. But then program directors who are buried under thousands of applications and are looking for efficiency, the emissary's favorite thing.
They started using these scores as the primary filter, a surrogate for the overall quality of an applicant.
And this creates enormous systemic corruption pressure on medical students. They quickly realize that their entire 4 years of medical school are basically being filtered down to this one single number.
So what happens? They focus an excessive amount of time and resources. We're talking 6 to 12 months of intense, dedicated preparation on test prep.
The goal shifts. It's no longer become a capable physician.
No, it's achieve a high score.
And the result is a system where the scores stop reflecting genuine clinical potential. They start measuring study discipline, rote memorization, and, crucially, access to expensive prep materials.
And this obsession comes at the direct expense of developing actual clinical skills or bedside manner or participating in valuable learning that isn't on the test, like volunteer work.
The curriculum itself begins to warp to accommodate the metric. Medical schools start teaching to the test rather than prioritizing complex clinical reasoning because the external scoreboard demands it.
The institution literally starts sacrificing the development of the master's contextual wisdom, the ability to look at a patient as a whole person, for the emissary's quantifiable output.
And this contamination pressure isn't just isolated to students. You see it in the incentive structures for academic faculty, too.
Oh, with the fixation on the number of publications.
Exactly. The number of publications and the journal impact factor. When department chairs use publication quantity for things like promotion, they incentivize faculty to focus on throughput, not on depth or revolutionary insight.
And this leads to practices that just artificially inflate the numbers.
The most common corruption mechanisms are things like salami slicing,
which is
taking one significant, meaty study and breaking it up into 3 or 4 smaller, less impactful papers.
Just to get more lines on the CV.
Precisely. And the practice of honorary authorship, where people who contributed little or nothing are added to a paper just to boost their own metrics.
So in both cases, the student scores and the faculty publications, the numeric scoreboard is flashing green. It looks like high performance.
But the actual quality of the output, whether it's the quality of the emerging doctor or the integrity of the research, is diminished. It's the ultimate failure of the map.
So if we agree that this quantitative fallacy is the root of the problem, how do we mitigate it? We can't just throw out all metrics. The emissary is an essential tool.
We can't. But we have to restore the master's perspective.
And one promising approach is to change the very structure of the assessment itself. We need to move away from what are called norm-referenced assessments.
Yes, norm-referenced assessments, the kind the emissary loves, are all about ranking individuals against one another. They generate competition. They prioritize identifying the quote-unquote highest performer, which just encourages cheating and corruption.
So what's the alternative?
Criterion-referenced methods, like those used in mastery learning. They shift the focus entirely. They define the required knowledge and skills for success in the field, the criterion, and then they just ensure that everyone meets that standard.
So it's not about being better than the person next to you, it's about being good enough for the job.
Exactly, which is far more productive in high-stakes fields like medicine or engineering. You don't want the surgeon who is just better than the other guy. You want the surgeon who has mastered the procedure.
That makes perfect sense. It shifts the focus from competitive ranking to defined capability.
And moreover, we have to embrace subjective narrative assessments. Quantitative scores are inherently limited. They can only capture the things we decided ahead of time were important and measurable.
But narrative assessments, the master's tool, they demand context.
They do. They allow an assessor to use rich language to describe the how and the why a student succeeded or failed. They reveal nuance, ethical judgment, relational skills, all the things a number just can't capture.
They're also harder to game.
Much harder to manipulate. And they require the assessor to engage their own intuitive, holistic judgment.
Which brings us directly to the frontline cost of this emissary dominance. healthcare. When a professional's focus shifts from a living, breathing human to bureaucratic compliance and metric management, the consequences are immediate and often tragic.
The data on physician burnout is a societal emergency. It's a direct measure of this systemic pressure. We're seeing rates between 25 and 60% of physicians reporting symptoms of emotional exhaustion, depersonalization.
Depersonalization, treating patients like objects.
Exactly, and a low sense of personal accomplishment. The pressure is relentless, and it stems directly from the administrative burden, the sheer volume of quantitative documentation required by the emissary.
It's staggering how much time is now spent just feeding the machine. I saw studies showing physicians spend between 1 and 2 hours on documentation in electronic health records, or EHRs, for every single hour of direct patient interaction.
The EHR, which was designed for efficient billing and data collection, becomes the ultimate tool of the emissary.
And this is a devastating loss of cognitive resource and, crucially, a loss of autonomy. When a doctor has to prioritize coding a procedure correctly or navigating some complex drop-down menu over looking the patient in the eye and just listening,
they lose the core purpose of their work. And that loss of autonomy is a potent predictor of burnout. It leads to a cascade of negative consequences: more medical errors, higher rates of substance abuse, depression,
and the tragically high risk of suicide among physicians.
Tragically high.
It's structurally destructive. We're taking these compassionate, highly trained people and forcing them to act as data processors instead of healers.
And the measure fixation leads to profound professional and moral dilemmas.
Like the story of the GP in Manchester. Let's call him Dr. Arthur. This really illustrates the human cost.
Tell us about Dr. Arthur and Mrs. Higgins. This is where the loss of context becomes palpable.
So Dr. Arthur described a routine appointment with an elderly woman, Mrs. Higgins. She was just there for a blood pressure medication refill. But the digital system, the clinic scoreboard, it flagged her immediately.
What for?
Her BMI was up, her compliance with statins was ambiguous, and the algorithm demanded that Dr. Arthur ask 5 specific quantitative questions to meet the efficiency quota for that quarter's audit.
He was forced into measure fixation. Tunnel vision.
Completely. He was compelled to prioritize the demands of the map, the pre-programmed steps over the living reality of the person sitting in front of him.
The territory.
He described staring intensely at his screen, clicking through drop-down menus and checkboxes with his back half turned to the patient. He spent 7 of their 10 allotted minutes just feeding the machine data.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
It was only when he finally turned around to hand her the prescription that he noticed she was quietly crying.
And why?
She had lost her husband 2 weeks prior, a profound piece of contextual information absolutely essential to her current health and anxiety. But there was no checkbox for grief on his dashboard.
And because the system demanded quantitative compliance, he missed the only thing that truly mattered.
He said he confessed he treated the chart, not the human being sitting across from him.
That powerful story just shows the emissary usurping the master in the most immediate setting possible. Those metrics, they weren't invented to be malicious.
Of course not.
But the structural demand for the data, for these explicit, measurable fragmentation of reality, means the professional has to adopt the left hemisphere's tunnel vision. The capacity for the master's holistic, empathetic vision is literally shut down by the demands of the bureaucracy. Healing requires context, and metrics destroy context.
And sometimes the consequences move beyond a loss of empathy and lead to direct metric-driven harm. This is especially true in high-stakes environments like a surgical intensive care unit.
You're talking about the 30-day mortality metric.
The analysis of that is devastating.
This case study highlights how a single quantitative metric can lead to moral distress and potentially futile care. In a surgical ICU, a patient with an advanced directive, one specifically requesting comfort care, was allegedly kept alive against his wishes.
And this treatment continued, draining resources, violating his autonomy.
Until the 30-day post-operative mortality metric window had safely passed.
The staff nurse on the case was experiencing severe moral distress and approached the head nurse about initiating a palliative care consultation. The response she got was chilling.
What was she told?
She was explicitly told they couldn't discuss discontinuing treatment until the patient was past the 30-day mark. The head nurse stated, and this is a quote, "The 30-day mortality rate is a very important statistic for the unit."
That is the numerical target becoming the ruler. It shows how a quality metric intended to ensure accountability, can be corrupted into an institutional mandate that overrides fundamental ethics and patient rights.
The goal shifted from patient-centered care to metric protection.
And it was confirmed because the physician apparently refused to return to see the family after the decision to withdraw treatment was finally made, suggesting this conscious dissociation from the human element, the ultimate act of depersonalization.
And after that 30-day window closed,
the patient was removed from the ventilator and allowed to die.
The conflict is just so profoundly clear. The patient's wishes, his prognosis, the ethical wisdom of the care team, all of it was in direct opposition to the organizational need to protect a quantifiable success metric.
And the solution here has to be systemic. It has to be based on restoring the master's perspective. We have to move away from a monolithic, metric-centered schematic toward a truly patient-centered model.
A model that would have to proactively integrate the contextual knowledge of the entire care team. The nurses, the patients themselves, the doctors.
Right, and actively track ethical decision-making and patient satisfaction alongside the raw outcomes. We need systems that welcome complexity, not hide from it.
Which requires empowering the people closest to the territory, the frontline staff. Their intuition and context awareness, the master's insights, are vital but so often ignored by bureaucratic, metric-focused leaders.
But all the barriers to that kind of shared decision-making, the time pressure, the administrative demands, the fear of litigation, they all align perfectly with the fragmentation caused by the emissary.
So until we rebuild systems that require and reward contextual understanding, moral distress and metric-driven harm will just remain endemic.
I'm afraid so.
Let's zoom out now and look at how the same fundamental imbalance defines the modern business world. Here, the coup takes place in the boardroom, and it favors fragmentation, abstraction, and short-term efficiency over holistic long-term value.
This phenomenon is so deeply rooted in the adoption of the Friedman doctrine, or shareholder primacy theory.
Articulated by the economist Milton Friedman.
Famously, yes. The theory basically posits that the only social responsibility of a business is to increase its profits and maximize returns to shareholders.
Which essentially places that measured quantitative financial metric above all other social and ethical responsibilities.
The emissary finds this doctrine perfectly rational. It identifies the measurable unit of success, the stock price, the quarterly profit, the return on equity, and dictates that the optimization of that singular target should be the company's only function.
And this doctrine immediately breeds short-termism.
Instantly. The prioritization of immediate, lower-value results over long-term, potentially more profitable results. The focus becomes fixed on the quarterly earnings target because that's the most explicit and immediate metric the market uses to evaluate the company.
And the consequence of this fixation on short-term KPIs is often tangible damage to the organization's long-term health.
Oh, frequently. We see executive decisions focused on cutting R&D, pausing crucial infrastructure upgrades, or reducing discretionary spending.
All in the service of artificially boosting quarterly earnings.
It's a classic case of sacrificing the long-term organism for the short-term scoreboard. Plus, you have to look at executive compensation structures, which are often tied directly to short-term stock performance.
Which incentivizes leaders to engineer temporary bumps in the stock price.
Exactly. Through things like aggressive stock buybacks or increasing dividends activities that divert substantial funds away from vital investment in innovation, employee development, and the kind of long-term research the master would recognize as essential for sustainability.
This sounds so much like that anecdote from the tech consultant about the mid-level director in San Francisco, Sarah, I think her name was.
Right. She was running a software team that was innovating brilliantly, but it was technically complex and required a slow incubation period.
The master's perspective would recognize that the team had invaluable institutional memory and contextual knowledge, that their long-term value was immense.
But the emissary demands immediate, explicit, quantifiable proof of efficiency.
And the tyranny of the scoreboard arrived in the form of Q4 financial targets. Executive leadership needed to show an immediate, visible reduction in operational costs to placate shareholders. Sarah was given a mandate to cut.
And she chose her targets based on the emissary's metrics.
Precisely. She cut the two most senior mentors on the team.
By them.
Because based on the metric of direct code output, their measurable efficiency was lower than the juniors they were training. Their time was spent in contextual wisdom transfer, mentorship, architectural planning, all non-quantifiable master tasks.
So she hit her number.
She hit her number. The stock ticked up briefly. The scoreboard flashed green. She achieved the metric required of her.
But the result was catastrophic.
Utterly. 6 months later, the entire project collapsed. The remaining junior team, while numerically efficient, lacked the contextual wisdom and architectural understanding to solve a major complex problem.
The company had achieved short-term optimization of the skeleton, but it destroyed the organism's long-term value. That is the definition of a cognitive error, a failure of perspective.
The left brain sees the parts, the individual high salaries that can be cut, but it's blind to the holistic, intangible value of institutional memory, cultural cohesion, and contextual problem-solving that drives actual sustainable value.
And this purely quantitative focus has consequences that extend far beyond any one company's health. They contribute to massive societal and ethical erosion.
You're referring to the systematic disempowerment of workers, the rise in wage inequality?
Yes. Critics argue that this quantitative focus, coupled with specific economic policies driven by the shareholder primacy model, has systematically suppressed worker wages and reduced benefits.
I've seen the numbers on this. Since 1979, economy-wide productivity has risen by over 60%.
But the hourly compensation for most workers has increased only a tiny fraction of that. The master's values investment in human capital, equitable distribution of value, are sacrificed for the emissary's primary metric: immediate profit maximization for shareholders.
That gap, the disparity between productivity growth and wage growth, is a clear measurement of where holistic contextual values have been sacrificed for a narrow quantitative target.
And the most extreme, the most sobering realization of this failure is the role the Friedman Doctrine played in creating the opioid epidemic.
Where the singular focus on profit maximization by pharmaceutical companies was so absolute that it systematically overrode any ethical or human considerations.
They prioritized increasing revenue and market share by aggressively marketing and abetting the widespread dispensing of prescription opioids without allowing the master's wisdom, the recognition of the devastating human toll, the addiction, the community destruction, to influence their operational strategy at all.
It illustrates the fundamental mechanism of the emissary's coup in its darkest form.
The system is designed to blind itself to non-quantifiable negative externalities. If human suffering isn't on the balance sheet, it doesn't matter. The relentless pursuit of a singular metric, divorced from ethical and contextual considerations, doesn't just reduce a company's health. It actively destroys lives and communities on a massive scale.
If we can see this reductionism destroying lives in the operating room and communities through corporate mandates, it's perhaps most heartbreaking to see how this pressure stunts development from the earliest stage.
The emissary's coup in education. Education is meant to cultivate the master, to foster creative, contextual, holistic thinkers. But instead, the pressure to quantify and standardize has created a system that actively penalizes master-like insights.
We standardize the learning experience to make it linear and quantifiable, ignoring the interconnected, non-linear nature of genuine discovery.
And the standardized testing regime becomes the ultimate scoreboard, prioritizing conformity over genius.
Which brings us to the story of the 10-year-old boy, Leo.
Leo's class assignment was straightforward. Write a descriptive paragraph about the solar system. The rubric, the standardized scoreboard, was detailed. Points for specific vocabulary, sentence structure, adherence to the paragraph format.
The emissary creating its perfect, rigid little structure.
Exactly. But Leo, who was consumed by the actual awe and scale of the cosmos, didn't deliver the expected fragment.
What did you do?
Instead, he wrote a rhythmic, slightly chaotic poem expressing the massive forces at play. And crucially, he drew a complex, annotated diagram of a rocket ship in the margins, using detailed labels and arrows to explain propulsion. He was demonstrating a sophisticated conceptual understanding of physics and engineering. It was brilliant, it was contextual, it was creative.
And I'm guessing he was not rewarded for it.
The standardized system, the inflexible emissary, it couldn't process this holistic creative output. Leo received a D. And the teacher's red pen note stated simply, did not follow format instructions. Paragraph required.
The system, designed to measure compliance and structure, penalized genius because it lacked the category for that specific expression of insight.
And this is how early we start pruning the master's wisdom. We are teaching children that intuitive creative insight, the ability to connect seemingly disparate ideas into a diagram or a poem, is less valuable than their ability to mechanically tick a box and conform to a specific linear output.
We're training conformists, not thinkers who can appreciate complexity.
Which is why McGilchrist urges us to fundamentally redefine our educational goals. He challenges our current obsession with curriculum coverage and superficial specialization.
We tend to think of breadth as, how many subjects can we skim in a year? And depth as, how specialized can we become in one narrow field?
Right. But McGilchrist suggests we need to shift from curriculum coverage to breadth of flexible attention, the master's way of broadly, globally, and vigilantly attending to the whole world. A truly educated mind is one that can apply contextual thinking across different fields.
And redefining depth is perhaps the most profound educational shift that's required.
Absolutely. Depth is not just digging deeper into a subject. It is the appreciation of the profound and unexplainable aspects of existence, and critically, always seeing things in context.
A sense of depth is intrinsic to seeing meaning and connections.
It is. But the reductionist pressure makes education focus only on linear, quantifiable processes, the schematic representation. It alienates students from the living vitality of the subject matter.
When you remove context, you remove meaning. When you reduce a complex historical event to a list of bullet points, you miss the profound human drama, the moral ambiguity, and the context that makes it relevant to us today.
The loss of depth replaces the vitality of reality with a plainer, two-dimensional picture. We have to encourage the experience of the lived world, the master's world in education, not just the abstract, two-dimensional screen representation of it.
So we've diagnosed the coup across our major institutions. The critical challenge remains. How do we restore the equilibrium? The master doesn't need to be overthrown. The emissary just needs to be returned to its vital subordinate role.
The first step, as McGilchrist suggests, is raising awareness. We need a kind of collective cognitive therapy session. We have to recognize the dominance of left hemisphere thinking and see its detrimental effects on our personal and collective well-being.
Insight has to come before meaningful change.
It does. And then comes the systemic reform, particularly in education and professional life. This means actively valuing the master's insights through structural mandates.
So, for instance, in education, we'd have to reintegrate the humanities, literature, history, philosophy, the arts, not as optional extras,
but as necessary tools to cultivate empathy, critical thinking, and a holistic understanding of human experience. These subjects are inherently about context and depth.
And in professional structures, especially healthcare, doctors and nurses must reclaim their role as trusted healers and experts in the territory,
rather than being dictated by profit-driven agendas and monolithic metrics.
This societal shift involves valuing wisdom, compassion, ethical integrity, the master's virtues alongside analytical rigor. It's about balance.
And on an individual level, we have potent, accessible tools for re-engaging the master. We can turn to ancient wisdom. Practices like mindfulness, which are deeply rooted in traditions like Buddhism, are profoundly effective in rebalancing the mind.
How does mindfulness specifically counter the emissary's tendency?
Well, the emissary is constantly fragmenting reality and running future or past projection schematics of what happened or what might happen. Mindfulness forces a conscious return to the present moment. It fosters broad, flexible, sustained attention.
The master's domain.
The master's domain. By intentionally observing the world without immediately categorizing it or trying to manipulate it, we foster a more equitable distribution of brain activity. This enhances mental health and holistic well-being.
It's the ultimate countermeasure to modern metric-driven anxiety, just stepping out of the spreadsheet and back into the present moment.
And furthermore, as technology increasingly mediates our reality, we need a critically informed view of artificial intelligence. We have to recognize that AI is the ultimate hyper-efficient emissary.
It excels perfectly at sequential linear processes, computation, categorization, pattern recognition of existing data.
It can synthesize the maps, but it cannot create the territory.
Right.
It struggles with the uncertainties, the context, the inherent ambiguity, and the non-computable wisdom of the master. The increasing dominance of mechanistic thinking, amplified by AI, poses significant risks because it just perpetuates the biases and limitations that are inherent in its training data, the fragments.
So we have to actively safeguard against the erosion of genuine human creativity, morality, and truth when this technology, a hyper-efficient tool of fragmentation, starts to dominate our perception of reality.
We must remember that only human consciousness, utilizing the wisdom of the master, possesses the genuine moral compass and depth of understanding required to govern the world we create with these tools.
Ultimately, the societal shift that's required really transcends these mechanistic paradigms. It demands that we embrace a more holistic perspective and acknowledge that we are far more than our neurological functions or our metrics or our data profiles.
True understanding of humanity comes from living life, not from fixating on screens. We must remember that technical brilliance, spreadsheets, and algorithms are merely the emissary's powerful tools. They are representations of reality, but they must always serve the broader, deeper wisdom of the master. We have to stop letting the map define the territory and start re-engaging with the actual breathing world to feel truly alive.